my name is Irene, and in this video we are going to talk about the paint face tool within Revit. So let's get to it. Now, in my previous video where I introduced materials, I mentioned that the way that we assign materials to geometry is by selecting the geometry itself and then assigning the material as a property. So, for example, if I want these walls to be brick, what I would need to do is select the wall type, go to edit type, go to edit structure, and say that here I want some kind of, brick material. Let's see, do we have anything that is not horrendous? Let's do this one here, brick common brown, apply, okay, apply, okay. And what you're going to see is that then that will apply the material to all of the faces of this geometry. I mean, this is horrendous. I'm gonna have to fix it. But let's pretend that for a second, this brick is what I want. Now, what happens if, for example, I want this brick to be the material overall, so I can see it here on the outside and I can see it here around my columns and whatnot. But then I want to say that this wall here and this wall here are painted a solid color or something else. What if I want to have specific faces within a geometry be a different material? Well, in that case, we can use the paint face tool. So the paint face tool is a modification, so you will find it under the modify tab, and you're gonna see it here under geometry. So it's gonna be this guy over here, quick key PT for paint. So if I go PT, that is going to bring me a quick browser of my materials. Now, to be very clear, these are just materials in project. So if you want a specific material, you need to make sure that you first bring it into the project before you start using the paint face tool. Let's say that I'm gonna search here for a paint. I'm not sure. Let's go with this clad white. Sure, why not? So you're gonna select your material and then you're gonna click on the surfaces that you want to assign that finish to. So I can click here and there you'll see, it's gonna paint my faces. Let's click on this one here, bam, it's gonna paint that face as well. Let's say that I want it on all of my interior faces of my project. So as you can see, the walls overall are still brick, but now on the interior, I have a completely different finish. And again, it is very important to understand, this tool here is not actually changing the properties of the wall. If I go to edit type and I go to structure, it is still brick commons. I am just literally putting a coat of a different finish on top of that geometry, okay? Now, another very important thing to understand is that you cannot just use the paint tool with anything. Specifically, you cannot use it with families. So if I go PT for paint, let's say that I really like that like clad white and I want to paint my doors, you're gonna see that doesn't matter how much I click, it's not gonna paint them. I also cannot paint my model in place component. So this is really important to understand. This tool of paint faces is only going to work with system families. These are the families that come built in your project when you first start. Like you cannot find them by going into your library, right? So that's going to be walls, floors, ceilings, roofs, all of these you can paint. Anything else, specifically families and model in place components, you cannot paint. You actually have to go inside the geometry, but once you are inside the geometry, you can. So for example, I'm going to be using here my model in place components. So let's say that I'm going to come here to this counter area here. And if I double click on it to edit it, once I am inside the component, I can use the paint tool. If I go and I select my paint cladded in white, I can come here and say that I want to paint this surface. See? Or I want to paint this back of my element here. Let me see if I can orbit around. There you go. See, I can paint that. Or I can say that I want to paint this surface here or anything else that I want. So families and model in place components, you have to go into edit mode. You have to be able to select the geometry elements that make it if you want to use the paint face tool. Another thing that I'd like to highlight is that when you're working with curved surfaces, it's actually going to allow you to paint curves at a time. So see, if I click here, it's not going to paint the entire surface. It's only going to paint those areas that you are clicking on. So pay attention to what Revit is highlighting before you are able to paint a surface. Unfortunately, the paint tool does not allow you to select multiple geometries at a time. And this is interesting because you should take this as an indicator on how the paint face tool is supposed to be used, which is sparingly. A lot of people, once they figure out that these tools exist, they go trigger happy and they just completely forget that material properties exist and they just want to paint every single surface in their project. And that is not the way that you should tackle assigning materials. Materials should always be first and foremost assigned as a property to the geometry. Now, let's say that you went trigger happy with your painting tool and now you're actually looking at your geometry and you're like, I actually don't want to have those materials assigned to these geometry. So if you want to remove paint, you can do that in the same section. So again, it's a modification. Under paint, you're going to see this little arrow. So if you expand on it, you're going to see that you have the option to remove paint. So it's going to be exactly the same process, except that we're going to use it to remove my paint finishes from the geometry. Okay, so we can assign paint, we can remove paint, but we need to understand that paint should be used sparingly only when there is a one-off instance of material application within a entire geometry. But with that, we have reached the end of this video. I hope you find it helpful. If you have any questions, by all means, feel free to add them in the comments. Also, feel free to like and subscribe. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining in. Thank you very much for sticking through, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye.